Hello, my name is Roger Canfield, and I'm not an engineer. And this is the first, my background is a doctor, but it's the PhD, higher and deeper. One of my more interesting jobs was being a propaganda minister for the Department of Water Resources, be a public information officer. And so I learned and loved water issues. We've got a great panel here, which goes down the mountain, down the valley, from Placer County to San Juan Water District to East Stockton to Westlands. Placer County Water Agency, we have Josh Alpine. General Manager of the San Juan Water District, Keith Durkin.
Assistant General Manager.
Assistant General Manager. I'm trying to, that's what the letter A is, here?
We have board members here, right?
Yeah.
Not quite there yet.
From East Stockton Water District, we have Kevin Kaufman. Do it? Yes. I'm sorry. And from the Westlands, Jason Peltier. What I'd like each of the panel members to do, in roughly alphabetical order here, is to, Alpine is first, to give their takeaway from what today, as it relates to the Auburn project, one hopes, and certainly as it relates to the water needs of your constituents. Josh.
Hello, my name is Josh Alpine. I'm the current director for PCWA. That represents Auburn all the way up to the Tahoe region. I fortunately wasn't here for the whole program today. Came in a little bit at lunch, typical politician, and then moved my way to the afternoon. But I was asked to speak about basically how the Auburn Dam would, or rural hydro and storage, would be beneficial to the area. And just a little bit of my background, I was a hydro system operator. I used to run the hydro projects in the Placer County, Nevada County area. And now I run the electric grid for Pacific Gas and Electric as a system operator. And when we look at the idea of having the Auburn Dam, really the benefits are mostly for the people below. The flood protection, access storage for the rest of this, for the state. But the current situation for us in Placer County can already meet its water needs, and where it's although I'm pro storage, I'd like to build storage everywhere else. I have to listen to the constituents in the area, and this is going to be a problem with the Auburn Dam. It seems that the communities in the area, there's competing ideologies out there of whether they want to build or not. And it came after the first attempt. My understanding is the only reason why it was challenged was due to the fact that the community didn't want to support the bonds to construct the dam. I think if there was to be an effort to make it successful in Auburn, there'd have to be a great community outreach and show really the benefits and how the transition of the economy would work from where it's now of an economy that is based around an open canyon with water rafting and recreational requirements to one that would be supporting recreation as a boating or as a large attraction. And that will be a significant challenge. But like I say, my philosophy is I'm a representative, and I'm going to represent what that area would like. And I think that's the most important thing I could take. My personal ideology is I do not oppose, me personally, I think that we need to develop more storage throughout the state. Water's an issue, and also electrical power. I don't know if people read today, Sanofre has been removed, been retired, and that's going to be a significant constraint on the state. And hydroelectricity is a great benefit of what we needed to supplement the renewable energy efforts that the state has legislated in. And hydro is the best way to do it. And we're going to have to build more. And that's where I'll leave. Hopefully I didn't sink anything here.
As a moderator with a point of view, there's been a number of surveys by the Auburn Dam Council and by the American River Authority and by Sac State University, and they show public support. I don't know in your precincts or not, I'm not sure. Okay, Keith Durkin, San Juan, Assistant General Manager.
And I am an engineer. Yeah. I felt like this was an AA meeting where you had to give an apology for that. Is this actually on? Is this on?
Yeah.
Oh, it is? Okay. I should have people raise their hands to see who knows where San Juan Water District is or what they are. I know more people here than I thought, more than just the board. But we're a wholesale water agency. We treat delivered water to a large portion.
We need you to speak loud.
Okay, I'll take a different mic. San Juan Water District is a wholesale water agency. We also have our own retail area, but primarily we're known as a wholesale agency that treats and delivers water to a large portion of eastern Sacramento County and part of southwest Placer County, Citrus Heights, Faro, Sorensville, Granite Bay, part of the city of Folsom. We're one of the few agencies that directly divert out of Folsom Reservoir. Cities of Roseville and city of Folsom are the other two. We're very sensitive to the operations in Folsom Reservoir and how upstream storage may help some of the shortcomings that Folsom has right now in terms of storage. Our total water supply comes from an intake in the dam, and it's at an elevation that's high enough that during low lake level conditions, we're a little concerned that our intake may be daylighted, and there'll be some 250,000 people out of water. When you consider everything that is expected from Folsom Reservoir, it's undersized at just under 1 million acre-feet. It's a multi-purpose facility, but flood control really trumps the other uses. That was one of the primary reasons it was built. As you heard before, currently Folsom is required to have between 400,000 and 670,000 acre-feet of empty space available going into every winter for flood protection during the winter months. And if we don't get decent precipitation or we don't have the snowpack we need, Folsom doesn't refill in the spring and early summer. To comply with Delta water quality and outflow requirements, fishery and habitat needs, in-basin deliveries, export deliveries. Folsom has increasingly been operated as a fill and drain reservoir since the early 90s. I happen to have some slides with me that I'm going to recycle, and I'll show you exactly what I mean by it being operated as a fill and drain facility. But in spite of the flood control operations that dictate the empty space, in other words, we could have as much as 400,000 to 600,000 feet of water left of carryover storage left in Folsom. It's really been operated where we have much less than that going into fall each year, and it really puts our water supply at significant risk if we have a couple of dry years in a row. If I can get this to work, I will show you what I mean. This is and I had to try to get some graphics up here to compete with all the other engineers that were talking here today. But this is a graphic of how Folsom has been operated since it was constructed in the mid-50s to 1960. If you look at the, is there a pointer on here? There we go. The years are along the bottom, and then you see December. So I'm sorry, ignore that. The The amount of storage in the reservoir is anywhere from 200,000 acre feet up to about 1 million. From the construction of the reservoir up to about 1990, every year, or most years, the reservoir would fill. And then it would drain throughout the summer, and going into the fall, there'd be about 400,000 acre feet of water left in the reservoir. Well, starting in about, and you see the amplitude here of this graph, pretty consistent, except for 1976, 77, when we got down to about 140,000 acre feet of water left in the reservoir. But starting in the 90s, and more dramatically in recent years, you see how it's been operated more as a fill and drain facility. It's, even though we could have as much as 450,000 acre feet of water left in the reservoir, we don't. The water is being used for other purposes. We're down below 200,000 acre feet, or getting close to 200,000 acre feet of storage in the reservoir more and more often. So obviously upstream storage would help with that. I'm going to quickly show you some more recent perspective of that. This is Folsom Lake levels, the reservoir elevation. Boy, I got a really shaky hand here. The reservoir holds about 977,000 acre feet. On average, this shaded area shows you during the course of the year from October 1st through September 1st about how the reservoir looks in terms of amount of water. 1976-77, it didn't refill. I mean, this is shows you how low the reservoir got during that period. Looked like that. Again, in 2008, looked very similar. This year, we're again going into the year very dry on a trajectory similar to 76-77. In November, December, as you saw previously, we happened to get a lot of rain, so it filled, and reclamation has been operating it to kind of throttle the flow in the American River and keep as much storage as possible in there. But if you look at how things have been operated over the last 5, 6, 7 years, again, this red line is 1976-77, but the yellow line is 2009, 2010, the green line is 2008, 2009, the blue line is 10, 11. Every one of those years, we're going into the fall with less storage in Folsom than we had in 1976 and 77. We've gotten lucky that we haven't had 2 dry years in a row, and the reservoir has been able to fill, but I don't think that's going to be the case forever. We are eventually going to have a couple of dry years in a row and be in a world of hurt. We've had some modeling done to take a look at impacts from the State Water Resources Control Board, Bay Delta Plan, the BDCP, the Bureau of Reclamation's Coordinated Operations Plan for the Central Valley Project and the State Water Project. And it indicates Folsom Reservoir may drop below our intake some 5 to 10% of all years. Again, our whole water supply is from Folsom Lake. For much of our service area, we do not have alternative supplies, so if it drops below the intakes, it's going to be a very kind of scary situation for our district. And again, we share that intake with the city of Roseville and the city of Folsom, so it could be a pretty dire picture. You heard before, Folsom is a first responder to water quality issues in the Delta. Weather conditions and tidal action can quickly affect salinity conditions. Because water from Folsom can get to the Delta in a day and a half, 2 days. That's where they release it from first to take care of those situations. It takes a good 3, 4, 5 days for water to get from Oroville to or Shasta down to the Delta to deal with those kind of conditions, or emergencies such as the Jones Track levee break. And climate change, you heard enough about climate change, that just exacerbates the situation that we're faced with. So additional upstream storage, yes, we would see a lot of benefits in that. It would provide some additional water supply reliability, certainly additional flexibility in operations in Folsom Reservoir, so our intakes not at risk. That would be for flood control, water supply, lower American River flow standards, cold water pool management, all the things you heard about today. We are on the shore of Folsom Lake. We see it every day, and that directly affects us, so we see the benefits there, and I can stop there.
Kevin Kaufman, East Stockton Water District.
Thank you, Roger.
I used part of your time, I'm sorry.
You're fired.
Immediately.
Oh, promoted, I'm sorry. Kevin Kaufman, I'm actually the one being fired today. You hear all right, Ken?
I just wanted to mention that we got an extension for good behavior. We can stay until 3:30 now, so we don't have quite the time constraints we had earlier. So feel free.
Well, I'll talk slowly then.
Okay.
I will not use my full time, Roger. Actually, I'm the one being fired today. A new general manager will be taking over on Monday at the Stockton East Water District. His name is Scott Moody. Nice young man, comes to us from Twain Hart Community Service District up near Sonora. So he's coming back down to the valley. He's a valley guy that got away, and now he's coming back, and I think he'll do a great job. Certainly better than the previous general manager. I am joining the Water Resources Consultant world, and if accepted, I hope to be around for a number of years at these and other forums. Speaking of old buffaloes, yesterday I had a conversation with Joe Marcotte, and I don't know how many in the room remember Joe, but Mid-Pacific Region Regional Director at the Bureau, and MID Director at Modesto, and for the last 20 years he's been the General Manager at East Side Water District down east of Turlock. Joe wanted me to say hello for all of his friends that he's missed over the years, and to let you know he had the opportunity to work on the Auburn Dam project, and turned it down to work at Jason's home down at Westlands, and much preferred the work he did at Westlands than what has been accomplished at Auburn Dam. But the reasons Stockton East Water District and San Joaquin County and our neighbors need the water from the American River down in San Joaquin County is we've got a critical overdraft condition down there, even worse than was described by Mike Wade earlier today, going down in Fresno. We're looking at demands between 150,000 to 220,000 acre feet per year of new surface water into our area just to offset the overdraft. So that's every year just to offset the overdraft. So you can see how quickly our groundwater has been depleted over the last 50 years. We've been focused on conjunctive use projects to resolve that problem. We've got recharge basins built at the Stockton East facilities, and we're planning many more, but it's to establish or achieve our goal of a sustainable long-term supply. Really what we need is we need a regulatory reservoir somewhere. East Bay Mud has built a beautiful facility called their Freeport Regional Diversion Project, along with their partners in South Sac County. That's the new Folsom Canal in the minds of people in San Joaquin County. There's available capacity in that facility to get water into San Joaquin County from the river. We'd like to do that at some point. The county is taking the lead on that role, and if this facility or a series of facilities were built on the American River, certainly that would be the source of those waters. San Joaquin County and Stockton East elected officials are hand in hand with their position on the Delta project being promoted by the BDCP in the fact that they're against it. But what they are in favor of is a through Delta alternative. And if we can keep the Delta whole with water flowing through the Delta to the pumps, we have no problem. And we'll support that with the county. So I'll think I've reached my 5 minutes, and I'll be quiet, Roger.
The guy needs a couple of contracts. Jason Peltier, Westlands.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm going to take Just my time to talk about not so much Westlands and our circumstance, but all of the people that rely on water exported out of the Delta, because we're all similarly situated, and talk about our water supply needs, and then wrap that back up into the need for more storage. But I think it's always important to remember in California, in our water system, we really, if you look at the way the precip comes, we need just 3 or 4 good storms a year. That's all we need. And if we get those, life is a lot better. It will be a lot better if we didn't have the regulatory environment we're in. And while the federal contractors on the west side, there's about 30 water districts. There's in total about 1/3 of the irrigated land in the state gets a portion of its water directly or indirectly from the Delta. So that's 3 million acres, about half the people. A lot of people in the Bay Area and a lot of people in Southern California. In fact, 1/3 of Southern California's water supply comes from the Delta. So there's a lot of people that are looking at and dealing with and trying to resolve the water supply, adverse water supply conditions we've been in for the last 20 years. For the last 20 years in Westlands, we've had 40, 60, 90% reductions in water supply, and only 3 years of full water supply. So that circumstance tells us, from a water supply perspective, that the Delta's broken. We know the fisheries have declined. We know there's seismic vulnerability. We know there are water quality issues. And we know that over the last 20 years when we've had supply reductions, it's all been in the name of trying to help the fish and Endangered Species Act implementation, and also the Central Valley Project Improvement Act implementation. For us, we look at that economic loss of productivity, and we see on that reality on one hand, on the other hand, all done in the name of helping the ecosystem and fish, and we're still, what good's it done, I guess? And I think we can pretty clearly see that the ESA regulators and the Fish and Wildlife Service and National Marine Fisheries Service failed. And I think they are beginning to recognize that, because the biological opinions have been sent back by a federal judge as unlawful, and they need to be redone. And so we're in the process of working on that in a little more open and collaborative way. But I'd like to take the example of this year as a poster child and talk about, and I think this links right into Folsom being yo-yoed over that same 20-year period. This was a great example this year. Mid-December, we were exporting at 15,000 CFS between the two projects, maximum exports. That was great. That's what you should be doing in the wintertime when there's surplus water in the system. We got like 6 smelt in the fish catching devices we have at the export pumps, and that triggered an automatic reduction in exports. So we went from 15,000 to about 2,000, and thereabout we stayed until May. So biological restrictions, primarily under the Endangered Species Act, cost us about 800,000 acre-feet of water this year. The way that, and never mind that the Fish and Game surveys showed in January, February, and March no smelt in the South Delta or the Central Delta. They were all out to the west, out in Sassoon Bay, Cache Slough, lower in the Ship Channel. So they're far away from the pumps, but still we have this automatic mentality that says we can use a calendar to run the water projects, and we can trigger based on one indicator, and it just hasn't worked. The smelt numbers are horrible. So, but as a result, what happened to us operationally is less water moves south. I mean, that's the time, this window when we're so heavily regulated was a time that water planners always looked at, always, and still do, as the best time to export water from a hydrology perspective. December, January, February, March, April, May. Get those surplus flows out of the system, move it south, and fill San Luis Reservoir, and that really supports our allocation. This year, We didn't export a lot of water. A whole bunch was lost, and we ended up with a 25% allocation. Now we're at a 20% allocation, and we're looking at a circumstance today that even if next year is normal, from October, whatever normal is, average, from October forward, we could have a zero allocation in February, and that's a pretty horrendous death sentence. It's drought driven somewhat from our dry months, but the reality is we're not operating the system in a balanced way. Over the same 20-year period, so that maybe adds to the yo-yo, because we are not able to pick up as much surplus water in the wintertime, so we have to rely more heavily on storage to meet what meager supplies we do get. In other words, we have to release more and draw the reservoirs down more. That's not the case necessarily with Shasta. We've seen over the same 20-year period a lot of times when Shasta is in good shape right up until the time it has to be drawn down for flood control, and then they just dump it in the fall. That's what leads us to say our primary objective, our number one job, if we're going to be able to do anything in the future or afford any other water supply and infrastructure investment, is we've got to get conveyance fixed in the Delta. So without that conveyance fixed, we don't have water to sell. Without water to sell, we don't have money to put into anything else. And while we support Shasta enlargement for sure, I'm sure to a man, if you asked him, and woman, if you asked them in our Westlands farmers, do you support Auburn Dam, they'd say yes. But you know, we are putting all of our energy into fixing the Delta conveyance situation, because without that, we're lost going into the future. How's that for a happy ending?
How about the Folsom South Canal, which was part of the original project? The canal that now goes to Rancho Seco.
Yeah. Well, just ask Sacramento City and County what they think about taking water down the Folsom South Canal. The most logical, sensible water management tool fought for 20 years, and the East Bay Mud had to build that diversion facility on the Sacramento is I think in a lot of ways, it's a reflection of the times we live in, but it's also a huge failure of common sense. But it was a master workaround, and I don't see any. I think my guess is that any effort to revive deliveries out of Folsom South Canals is gone now with the Freeport project, because what water, my sense of it is, what water Sacramento County wants on its east side is going to come from Freeport. Nobody has their eyes on Folsom South.
Sorry I asked that. I'd like to do a little takeaway of my own on this, as my own definition of moderator. A couple of takeaways, it seems to me, is that we've seen that this last year is one of the driest on records, and we have a whole series of very lucky years in terms of our water supply, in terms of possible drought. We also learned that that's water supply. We also learned that the Ark flood, the big one, which will come, we don't know when, but it will come, does 3 times the damage of the earthquake that everybody's been talking about. And we also learned, I believe, that the earthquakes are a design problem that a lot of people have been working a long time on, and is far from insurmountable. Problem is that we have some solutions that really do not get to the problem. There's someone used the phrase "dry up a few people," by which they meant agriculture and Westlands. Well, that's self-interested and a narrow view. Also, we a big focus on upstream, on cooler water. That also could be substantially helped by the Auburn Dam. But I think the takeaway for me well, we ought to look at this the best we can as a project, and I think any and all of these storage projects we're talking about are good on their own. And Auburn's just a very good one. More water, more power, and all the rest of it, but that doesn't say anything against any of the other projects. But we ought to be taking an outlook that's for the good of the region and for California writ large. Finally, I agree with Tom McClintock that we ought to really think outside the box, and that is that California does have an abundance of water. Moreover, revenue bonds, the Auburn project will pay for itself, as well as the other local projects we talked about today. So anyway, that's your moderator's point of view. We want to go right to Pete or Q&A, what Kim?
Yeah, Q&A with the panelists if there's any questions.
With the panelists.
I mean, the audience.
Oh, okay. Questions? Any and all of the panelists?
I don't know, man. It was pretty cold coming up first. But I do say one of the big things that have to be done is, you're right, is the environmental policy and what's going on. We have a bunch of people saying no to everything, whether it comes for water storage or power plants, or whatever. And like I said, the forum is a good example of where you have a conversation taking place with all the parties that will have something to benefit. We can't just have a no is not a conversation. And I'm sure the people from Placer County, in my area, see that all the time. It's just no starter. But we're going to need to have more storage in the state, plain and simple. We got to create more projects that store water and provide electrical and electricity, cheap and affordable electricity to run our state. And the Auburn Dam is just one of the many projects that are proposed that I can see that benefit everything. But there's just going to be significant challenges to try to make anything happen until we can get a group or people can come to a table and discuss and be realistic about making these things happen, because everybody's tied into it. No is not an answer.
I'd like to pick up on this notion of no and mythology and misinformation, and because it's something that certainly Auburn as a dam has had a long history of having to face with simplistic notions and distorted data and biases, and where people use whatever data they can to support their position. And we see a lot of that in the Delta as we are working on the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, trying to build conveyance to make our water supply more reliable. The mythology is a challenge. There's like people would say that Auburn Dam would fail in an earthquake if you built it. That's a powerful myth, and it's a plausible myth. People say if we build the tunnels, we're going to dry up the delta, or we're going to make it an inland sea. Not really physically possible, but a picture can be painted to that effect, and we can talk about all the layers of regulatory protection from every governing regulatory body that we have to face, and getting 200 some permits in order to accomplish the conveyance, and the oversight, the continual oversight those people are going to have. There's a lot of protections built in to avoid the kind of apocalyptic scenarios that people that they do seem to have, a lot of them have an agenda that is driven by this unfortunate mentality, I guess I would say, or that if our problems are solved, if our problems on the west side, in Southern California, for our lack of reliable, predictable water supply are solved, it's going to come at somebody else's expense. It's going to come at the fish are going to be destroyed, or the delta is going to be destroyed, and I just think that's kind of a sad conclusion to arrive at, given all of the protections that are built into law.
Questions? Comments? I don't think the bar's open yet.
Okay, well, let's, here's one.
Oh, yes, sir.
Just one comment, you know, it seems like now the kind of talked over this.
Speak up.
But the, you know, the pendulum has swung all the way to the environment side now. And I think that unfortunately, since our society is mainly reactive, that we probably won't end up getting any additional storage unless there's actually like a flood event where people die, and then it's, the people are going to say, oh my God, you know, we should have done something about it. And it's just unfortunate to me that it seems like that's the way things work.
In fact, our conversations with Tom McClintock, and there have been quite a few, he's given us staff work as volunteers. And the basic idea is to be ready when we have a disaster.
That's it.
Glad that you brought that up. Prior to becoming on the water board, I was a councilman in the city of Colfax, and went to the CAP quite back for water policy. And one of the big things in the region was about flood protection, and it was being tossed around for a long time about what would be the most bang for the buck to protect the Sacramento region, and it was always the Auburn Dam, the most efficient project to prevent a flood scenario or a Katrina type scenario in the valley below us. Is what they said. But it seems like they've been putting a lot of their efforts into the I want to say the dikes, but the dikes and the other type of things, levees. Thank you. Into the levee system more than they were interested about pursuing another dam, which I don't think was the best benefit, which was the best bang of the buck.
I think Doug Gosi gave the best description of that. It's a lot easier to defend a 1 mile dam than it is 1,600 miles of levees.
Roger.
Ken just asked me a question. Thanks, Ken. Ken and I had a conversation which led to coming to this meeting, and that was in Stockton, one of the things we're experiencing, which is happening here at SAFCA as well, is the flood insurance issue. And the question I was going to ask Mr. McClintock is, why couldn't he get the reform of the flood insurance through FEMA included in the WERDA bill this year? And I saw last week that he wasn't able to do that, but we could ask that at another time. But I'm not sure if you understand what's happened to us, but your flood insurance that you pay for an X area is $421 a year or whatever the number is. That's going to be going up by 20% a year over the next 5 years. FEMA's been instructed by Congress to be self-funded. If you're putting it into a high hazard area, or I guess a commercial business would be about $3,200 a year, it again is going up about 20% per year over the next 5 years. If you're in a high flood area, it's calculated on a actuarial basis. So a facility like this in a flood-prone area might cost you $30,000, $40,000 a year for flood insurance. So keep that in mind as far as what kind of money can be generated from a flood control facility. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Let's thank the panel.
Thank you all. The engineering comment was my incompetence with the microphone.
Our next speaker is a former speaker. Pete Bonadelli is going to talk about how we implement changes to a very complicated water delivery system. Thanks, Pete.
Today you've heard a lot about the ups and downs, the positives, the negatives, everything that are out there facing reviving Auburn. The bottom line is basically this. When the water right was lost and the CalFed determination was made, Auburn Dam was taken off the table as a viable large project. If it has any chance to get back on the table, a combination of things have to happen. Number one is a public climate has to be created that understands the need. That's what this forum was designed to start. Number two, one or more local agencies have to be willing to step forward as local sponsors. The reality is that it's probably not going to get back on the table with the state or federal projects, and very few large state or federal projects are ever likely to be built again in the environmental and political climate until it's too late or after that disaster we've just talked about. Along those lines, it means that we need to look at the various potential partners. What you just saw here today on this panel is exactly what we're facing. Placer County essentially says our needs are met. We have to look at the political climate of us getting involved. Therefore, it's not necessarily viable for them to be wanting to step forward. San Juan has a clear need to step forward. They have a need to protect the fluctuations in Folsom to protect their direction. Stockton and that area obviously needs water. The Folsom South Canal, which was the delivery conveyance, is essentially gone and replaced by a new diversion from the Sacramento to deliver the water if it flows to them on a water right, which means storage, so they are potentially a viable partner. Westland's stated the case for essentially everyone to the south, that unless the storage, the conveyance question is resolved, they're even having increased storage doesn't make much difference from their perspective. Obviously, they need the increased conveyance. There is something everyone keeps looking at and trying to offset. Congressman McClintock gave us an answer in terms of how you can fund or finance a dam from a private perspective. That works as long as you have the water to sell. The electricity will definitely be there, definitely going to work. The water has to be able to have a market to make it work or it won't fly. One of the issues that's up and is out there is the question of the demands for water for environmental purposes. Those are not likely to go away. If the demands are there, as presented by several other people that you've heard today about the concerns with the flows that are required from the Sacramento and San Joaquin system, is there an incentive to help provide increased storage to protect the existing water rights? In many ways, that's what Sykes Reservoir is all about in terms of many of the people in the Central Valley. That's what Temperance is about in terms of the San Joaquin. It's a protection, increased storage to ensure that they can maintain the water that's available to them. The question coming out of today is, are there sufficient numbers of local districts and others who have a potential need or desire to step forward? Because you need someone to take the lead on two big factors. One, the water right, and two, reviving the planning process that's necessary to make Auburn viable. So what we are basically seeing is that there's still an education needs to be done with local agencies and others to get to the next step. If we have that type of commitment to move in that direction, we have a chance to bring Auburn back, put it on the table at a time when water storage is coming back for all of the reasons that you heard today, climate change, all the other options. And that's a question that's yet to be resolved. If we move forward, it's going to probably wind up being more than one agency. Some form of a JPA or something similar is going to have to be put in place. And that's essentially the next set of steps to explore it. And what's still missing, and at least in my reading after today, is the commitment of the first agency or two to step forward. And so there's still an education outreach to be done. Today was a good first step, and I think it's a start, but far from the finished program.
Sergeant at Arms, close the doors.
Thank you all for your attendance and help. Take questions.
Yeah, I've got one simple question. What would be the ramifications of something, say, like the city and county of Los Angeles stepping up and saying, we'll take it?
There will be a significant local resistance just by the definition of somebody from Southern California saying yes. But again, even if we have the water, without conveyance, they don't have a means of getting it. That's what I'm glad we had Westlands here, because they made the point from their perspective. And if you build the conveyance to make it available for them, you have concerns in the local areas. You heard from Stockton East about the issues and what that impact is in the Delta. So we're in the standard position that's there. The climate is right to at least put storage back on the table. The question is the climate right? Do we have a local sponsor or two to help make Auburn part of that increased storage picture? Roger?
About $1,000 acre foot water. That change the people's minds. Probably not.
Economics always dictates itself. If not, I'll turn it over to Ken to wrap it up for the day. Thank you.
Thanks again, Pete. Yeah, that just about concludes things for today. I did want to make two last comments as a follow-up. The one thing on the BDCP, we have copies of Dr. Pike's evaluation of 5 different alternatives there, and that chart, which is fairly fascinating. We didn't really get away from the BDCP proposal today. We were originally going to include that in the program, but there's been plenty of talk about that already in other forums. I did want to say something else. Kevin Kaufman mentioned that the flood insurance would be going up 20% a year for 5 years. And it's at $412 a year right now. Did anybody calculate what that was going to be in 5 years? I just did, and it's a 248% increase. It'll go from 412 to 1,025 in just 5 years. So that's substantial. If you multiplied 1,025 per, it maybe doesn't stop at 1,025. It goes on from there. But part of one of the surveys that we did, the Auburn Dam Council, one of the questions was, would you be willing to pay a property tax assessment for this project? And the answer, well, we had different dollar amounts, and people were willing to pay $25 a year, unwilling to pay $50 a year. So somewhere in between $25 and $50 a year per household amounts to quite a bit of money in itself for a water storage project. So as Pete said, the next steps are to identify a JPA, an existing one, or form one through local water agencies or others, and then pursue an update of the feasibility study. And that was actually the recommendation from the 06 Auburn Folsom South Unit report that BOR did December of 06. So thanks very much for everybody for coming today. Remember, we can still meet in the lounge just around the corner, just to the left before you get to the entrance. And when we have the next one of these gatherings, you'll get an invitation. Thanks very much.